G'day guys, welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. Today we're up to episode 20. Oh my god, it's 31. Sorry guys, I've had a massive weekend. I've been away, obviously why I didn't stream the Grand Final. But I did watch the Grand Final. We're doing a big review of that today, and we'll talk about a few other news things from the AFL as we go through. So I think we'll just start straight away with the Grand Final. Big review of it. What a massive game it was. People are calling it one of the best Grand Finals ever. And in recent times, I'd definitely say it's up there. Probably in the past 20 years of watching AFL footy, it'd be one of the top three probably I've ever seen. It's probably I got a little bit of bias, obviously, with Sydney, but other than that, it was a massive Grand Final. Collingwood, of course, did come out on top in the end. I will say that the advantage call to Brisbane late in the game was very, very, very unlucky. I don't think it should have been an advantage. I think it was Bailey at the time who had the ball and kicked it forward. I don't think he would have heard it in that crowd. But nonetheless, I think it is good to see in the end that the number one team of the whole year did win the Grand Final. I think that's good. Collingwood, obviously being the biggest club in the land, great to see them win in the end. For AFL, I think it's good. For some people, I don't understand being pretty disappointed. For Brisbane fans out there, I don't think you should be too disappointed at all. They played a massive game of footy. They'll be back next year. I'm very confident in saying that. They've got the list to go again. I think Chris Fagan, after the game, also even said that some teams lose a Grand Final and they come back and win the next one. So I'm definitely putting Brisbane down to do that. I can see them bouncing back really quickly, the Lions. They are just such a good team. And they were a kick away from it. They were so close. Every single time Collingwood got in front in that game, just took the lead. You thought about those sort of times Collingwood were going to take it away. And late in that last quarter when they got that 10-point lead, I think everyone, including myself, was like, that's it. Collingwood have got it. And then again, they kept on coming. McCluggage got the ball to Danaher. He snapped a quick goal. And those last minute and a half was insane. I just could not believe it watching it all the way down in Port Kenny of all things. Down in, it's like country, South Australia, down there, the Eyre Peninsula, basically where the join is, well, not a join, but there's like if you look at a map, you'd see like a little bit of like a edge in it down the bottom. It doesn't matter. But anyway, yeah, watching all the way down there, 6 hours away from Adelaide, but it was a massive game. Everyone was enjoying it. Had a mate down here who was from New Zealand. He loved it, one of his first games ever seen, and he loved it. So I think it was definitely everything that everyone was asking for. The last few Grand Finals have been absolutely atrocious for non-supporters of each side, and I think it's just something that we needed to see. We needed to see a close Grand Final, right down to the wire, all the way from start to finish, a close game, and we got it. And I think that's why a lot of people are saying it's one of the best Grand Finals ever. I think it will probably have to set in for maybe a couple of years, maybe just to see. I don't know in the heat of the moment if you can call it the best Grand Final of all time, just to let it settle a bit. See how we go. But I think honestly, just on how the game went, we haven't seen a Grand Final like that in a very long time. Probably even the 2018 Grand Final between Collingwood and West Coast, when West Coast won it with a couple of minutes to go from Dom Sheed. I think that was a very different game. Collingwood obviously blew out of the blocks, and then West Coast pegged their way back into it, and then were able to just jump them at the end. I think that's very different. The years when Richmond were winning them, all kind of Richmond dominated. A couple of years before that, it was all Hawthorn. 2012, I guess that was a little bit different as well. So we really haven't seen a Grand Final like that in a very, very long time. I honestly can't think of a Grand Final like that since probably the St Kilda Collingwood, St Kilda Geelong era. Way back then, so probably 13, 14 years ago now. And that one is probably a little bit young to go all the way back past like 2005 and 4, even when Sydney won it in 2005 and I cried when I was a little kid, probably like 5 or 6 years old. I really didn't appreciate it, and 2012 I appreciated it a whole lot more. And yeah, just I think Collingwood fans would be, 2010 they won it. They've lost in 2018. So it's been 13 years. It's been quite a long time. Brisbane fans obviously waited a lot longer. They've been waiting since 2004, and unfortunately they may have to wait for another... they have to wait at least another year. But I don't think they could lose any fans from those games at all, obviously. They were massive. And we'll get to the actual game itself, talking more about the game. I think the Norm Smith medalist, obviously best on ground, was picked correctly. I think Bobby Hill was amazing. People watching the game for the first time, never seen AFL, were like, this guy's really, really good. He's really short, but he's really good. And I was like, he's done really well in this game, Bobby Hill. He was probably the match winner in the end, if you think about it. I mean, he kicked 4 goals in a grand final. Obviously it happens in big wins in grand finals, but to win in such a close game, pretty low scoring considering it was Brisbane of all things, and he was able to get on the scoreboard, and it was really the difference. I don't think Collingwood could find a goal kicker up forward for a lot of the game. Billy Frampton, he played well on Harris Andrews, but he couldn't kick a goal. Myercheck was pretty well held. Jamie Elliott was pretty well held. He just was the one to get out, and he was playing on a very good player in Starskovich. So I think he was amazing, and I think he did deserve the Norm Smith. I don't think that Dacos had the most disposals. I think he played pretty well, I will say. He kept on dropping his knees, and he hasn't done that, I don't think, most of the season. So I don't know where that came from, but I do think that was a bit rough on Brisbane, that he kept on dropping his knees and the umpires were letting him get away with it, but here we are. I do think that Brisbane got away with a couple of free kicks. I will say it was not the best umpired grand final I've ever seen, but I think the players played a brilliant games. I don't think... if I had to pick a player for Brisbane who should have played better, it would be Eric Hipwood. And for Collingwood, I'd say it probably would be Billy Frampton at the end of the day. Maybe even Darcy Cameron to an extent. I think he was pretty poor. But at the end of the day, I think those 3 players had pretty poor matches. I think it does also bring up the question of if every single player who plays a game deserves a premiership medallion. I've kind of I've gone in and out of this argument or discussion in years. When I first heard it, I just thought it was a bunch of bullshit. I thought, well, if you're playing on grand final day, you're the one who's won it. I've kind of got to the thought that maybe it's not one game. I think that one game shouldn't give you a medallion. I don't think that's fair enough. I think if you play +5 or maybe something like that, 5+ games or 10+ games, even 10, I think is probably fair enough. I think also as well, it could even be like, they've played 5 of the past 15 games of the season. Maybe if they played the first 5 and then didn't play anymore, I don't think, I think there's definitely arguments to both sides. I do think, though, that a lot of players like John Noble and Taylor Adams not getting a premiership medallion is a bit tough considering they played most of the season and just didn't get there in grand final day. But again, John Noble got dropped. He didn't get... He wasn't not playing because of injury like Taylor Adams. So there's definitely ebbs and flows, and Dan McStay as well obviously did miss out. But yeah, I think it's very tough on a lot of those players. I'm sure they're feeling a bit odd about seeing their mates going on and winning. You hear about players all the time, like Ben McGlynn for Sydney back in 2012, being sad at the time, obviously, that they won. Well, not sad, but he was obviously happy that his mates were winning a premiership, but he knew that he could have very well been out there and was sad. And you obviously hear about players who miss the grand finals and they cry. And obviously, it's... I don't know how it would feel. Obviously, not from first-hand experience, but it's just... Yeah, it's really tough for a lot of players. I don't know how they fix that, the AFL. I don't know if it should be... I still don't think 1 game or 3 games, or even... Yeah, I think 1 or 3 games, it's not to say that you didn't, help the club this year, but, you weren't there to push them to a premiership per se, I think, anyway. But again, I've never played AFL footy, so what the fuck do I know? I just think that, at the end of the day, I think a couple of players got a bit stiff to an extent not to get a premiership medallion. I think that's a good discussion to have. But yeah, I think my thought process on that has changed over the years. And I'm sure there's a few players pretty disappointed at Collingwood who, weren't in that grand final team or that premiership winning team. So, I think that conversation will definitely be heard a lot more in the next couple of years. Congratulations to Collingwood. I didn't actually put an Instagram post on the votes. I would give 3 votes to Brad Hill. Bobby Hill, sorry. I think he was massive. Coleman, for me, Brisbane, I think he was their best player. I'd give him the 2 votes. And 1, that would be a tough, honestly. I wouldn't give it to Nick Dacos, to be honest. I'd have to think about that, honestly. I can even look at statistics. I know I said that I wouldn't when I talk about Brownlow votes, but this is a Brownlow. Brownlow. Yeah. Tom Mitchell was pretty good as well. you know, maybe Jack Crisp. I think he was very good in this game. He kicked 2 goals. Yeah, I'd probably say Jack Crisp with the 1 vote. I think he was very good as well and was a bit... Yeah, I think he's been a very unheralded player all year, Jack Crisp, to be honest, at Collingwood. That's hard to say when all the media's about Collingwood. But I think Joe Danaher, I do want to give a special mention to him. I think he was very good in this game for Brisbane. I think there would have been a lot of talk about him, especially, not delivering on a grand final day. And he was massive. And he almost got him over the line in the end because Eric Hipwood was pathetic, in my opinion. I think he had a terrible game for Brisbane and was hampering them a lot of the time. Yeah, I think that he had I was very disappointed by Eric Hipwood's game. He dropped a lot of marks. He was fumbling. I know a grand final is a huge different kettle of fish than just a regular game or even a regular final. But he had some moments where he could have definitely brought Brisbane a lot closer to winning this game. And I just think that I know a lot of talk about Eric Hipwood is about his massive contract that he has at the Brisbane Lions, and I think it all has to be fair to be mentioned it because he hasn't played very well in the grand final, and the best players in the game are always recognised in the big finals and big grand finals, and he didn't stand up. I think Joe Danaher is starting to stand up. We've seen him in the first final against Port Adelaide kick 5 goals, in the grand final almost get Brisbane over the line. And Charlie Cameron, he had a pretty quiet first half. He lit up the game in the second half, again almost got him over the line. Yeah, I think that despite a few players, this was a very good grand final and arguably the best. I think that may be a big thing to say for some people, but as a neutral fan of that game, it was a good game to watch. And even though I was barracking for Brisbane, at the end of the day, I think everyone that saw that game would say that was a good game of football and it's one of the best games of football we have seen. So I think clap all around for everyone playing in that game, the all 46 players, and also Craig McRae. I think he had a kid. I think he mentioned that in the speech before they gave him the Premiership Cup. He mentioned that he got a kid and he got a premiership on the same day. He from 2 seasons ago being an assistant coach to now being a premiership coach is insane. The amount of time he would have had to spend to sit there and wait for his moment to become a head coach of an AFL team and then to become the coach of the biggest club in Australia, where they were in a pretty poor spot. They were down right in the lower part of the ladder in 2021, and 2022 they were a point away from a grand final, and now they won a grand final. So you got to give kudos to him, no matter what you think of Collingwood. At the end of the day, he was, a very good coach, and against his old side as well of playing against Brisbane. He won the 3 premierships there, I believe. I'm pretty sure he was there for all 3. Great performance, great effort from Brisbane as well. Chris Fagan, it's obviously tough, but I do commend him coming out and saying we're going to come back bigger and better next year. And I know a lot of coaches will say that, but at the end of the day, I think that Brisbane will back it up. And I don't think there's big talk. I don't think there's a big question mark on Brisbane next year. And I don't think there'll be a big question mark on Collingwood as well. I think that Collingwood could set themselves up for almost a dynasty moment here. We saw in 2011 they did lose. 2010 they won. 2011 they lost the grand final. 2012 they missed out in the prelim. So we'll have to see if Collingwood can go and continue from a grand final premiership in 2023. From a prelim in 2022. Can keep on going? I still think they have a couple of holes in their list, and they look like they could be filling them, a few of them in the trade period. I'll be interested to see how Darcy Cameron goes if they do look for Todd Goldstein. There's been a lot of talk about that. So I think that's definitely a good talking point for Collingwood. I still think they lack a little bit of, tall forward prowess, if you could put that. We do obviously have a lot of trade videos on the channel. We have a playlist of them if you want to watch them. I'm sure a lot of you are here because of that those videos. But yeah, I think Collingwood, I don't know if they'll have a big trade period, to be honest. They haven't been linked to many players. They've been linked to Buku Kamas of one player and Todd Goldstein, of course. I think it's a bit surprising they haven't been linked to Mabior Chol, but I think that could be an option in the end. Brisbane being linked to Mabior Chol, one. I don't know if they're linked to many others, Brisbane. So, and Tom Duday, obviously, but he won't be there for most of the year if he goes to Brisbane. So, I'll be interested to see how these clubs set up their list for next year. I think that Geelong and Sydney from the grand final, I think Geelong went the right way about it, but they just had a lot of injuries. I think Sydney went the wrong way about it after the grand final. They only got Aaron Francis of all players, and he had an okay year for the Swans, but I think that I think I mentioned it throughout the year as well, that if you're not going forwards, if you're not moving forwards and getting new players into your club, you're going backwards or not bringing in enough stuff. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, Sydney didn't play a lot of their draftees from the 2022 draft. So I think that Sydney looking in the right direction this year, but I do think that Brisbane and Collingwood still have to innovate, update their lists again, and I will be very interested to see what Collingwood do in the trade period, because I still think they can get a lot better, Collingwood, on their list, and I think Brisbane, they've got a very good list, and I don't know where they can really fill up on. I mean, maybe defence, and maybe just a little bit of more, depth, but really, I think Collingwood have a lot more room to improve, and they've won a premiership of all things. So, yeah, I think both clubs in really good spots going into next year. Trade period's going to be massive as well, which we'll probably talk about a little bit after this. And great grand final, one of the best I've seen. So, yeah, I think that's where we'll leave the review of the grand final. One more thing I did want to say is we did do a couple of bets with my brother. And we did talk about at the end of last episode that whoever won this, lost this, would have to pay for a ring light for the podcast, and we both only got one. So we had first goal scorer of the first half, first goal scorer of the second half, most disposals, most goals, Norm Smith, and winner and the margin. We both didn't get first goal scorers for either of the halves. I got the most disposals. I did pick Nick Dacos. My brother actually picked most goals to Bobby Hill. He only picked 3 instead of 4, but we weren't really looking at that. We didn't get the Norm Smith either. I picked Joe Danaher. He may have had a chance if Brisbane did win, but I doubt it. And the winner was obviously Collingwood. We both picked Brisbane, so yeah, that's fair enough. So we both drew. So I think we basically came to an agreement that we'd pay half each for a ring light. I think that'd be fair enough. And I think over the off season we'll be doing a couple of things, talking about different sports. Been following a lot more of the Premier League at the moment. Also the NFL, and obviously the Big Bash and the cricket will be starting pretty soon now, so I'll probably be talking a lot about that throughout the podcast this year. But obviously, now that the AFL season has been completed, we get to the off-season when we get the trade period. I won't be talking too much about trades here, but I think that we're in for a pretty good trade period. I'm not going to say it's going to be a really massive one. I think we will definitely see... I think we'll see a couple of surprises, as we usually see. Like, I think one last year was obviously Jaguar O'Meara, who went to Fremantle pretty late, and Tom Mitchell leaving Hawthorn, going to Collingwood. There are a couple of players that just came out of nowhere. There hasn't been a lot of trade news really in the past week or so, so there will be a couple more, and we will be doing a trade video later in the week, so I hope you guys stick around for that. A couple of players did request trades to Sydney, so the Sydney Swan supporter, I'm really happy about that, and they've been linked to a lot of other players, so I think this is a really good trade period for the Swans. I think big clubs going into this trade period will be Sydney, Port Adelaide. I think they're linked to a lot of players. I think it'll be interesting how Carlton go. I think that'll be interesting how they go there. I think both the premiership teams, grand final teams in Brisbane and Collingwood will be interesting. Essendon, I think, is a very interesting club as well, because there are a few players going there, but there's also a few players leaving. And Essendon have always been pretty active in the off-season period, so they've really got an important season coming up next year, Essendon, and they've got an important off-season to kickstart that. I think Fremantle are in a pretty big hole with the trade period. They've only been linked to Jeremy Sharp, who's a player who didn't play an AFL game this year. So I think Fremantle have got some big problems. I don't think they're going to improve much at all if they don't do something massive in the trade period. I think also the Crows will be interesting, actually. The Crows look like they're definitely going to be jumping up next year. They could be one of the bigger risers next year, so I think they'll be interesting how they go. Richmond bringing in Jacob Kaczynski will be good. I will be a little bit surprised if they don't bring in a little bit more Richmond. I think they need a little bit more with Adamuze coming in. I think Hawthorn, even though I mentioned him, I haven't really mentioned much about Hawthorn, but I do think that even though they missed out on a couple, they will be bringing a couple in. And I think Hawthorn, they kind of know this isn't just, they can't just look at the trade period in this draft. This is a couple of years in the making here. They've already been linked to Aaron Norton and a couple of others going into next trade period. So that will be interesting how that goes. Geelong, again, not really linked to a lot. I'll be very interested to see how they go in the off season. I think they're probably the most interesting club to look at because they haven't been linked to a lot. and a lot of their players, a few retired, but not a lot. And it'll be interesting how they go because they've been linked to a lot. They usually bring in some pretty big names in trade periods. They don't usually look at the draft, and they're already looking at trading out their pick 7. So it'll be interesting how Geelong go because I do think they need to update their list. They have still got a lot of older players on there, and if they don't make they are their club is basically built off of making finals every year. And they've only missed, I think this was the second time since 2006 or 7. So they don't miss very often, Geelong. So, they need to find a way to make the finals again. And, because I don't really see it with the list that they've got. We saw that when they got a few injuries into their club, their bottom's rung of players, their depth was just shot. They had nothing because their VFL side is playing They don't really do that well. You can kind of see it. If you look at the VFL ladders over the past couple of years, I don't think they've made the finals in 3 or 4 years, even though they won a premiership last year, And a lot of clubs are built off of their depth, and Geelong really haven't been for a while. So they've kind of been top heavy, and I think that this is a really interesting trade period for them because I don't see them going to the draft. They're already looking at getting rid of their pick 7, so they have to do something in the trade period, but they haven't been linked to a lot. They're obviously linked to Brodie Grundy very early on and a little bit to Sean Darcy, but other than that, they've been really not much at all. And I do think there's a little bit more for Geelong despite other than just getting a ruckman here. They need to reset their midfield. They need to bring in a couple of defenders, in my opinion. And their forward line, yes, it's good, but I think both their tall forwards are getting quite old now. Tom Hawkins definitely, and Jeremy Cameron's getting up there too. So, yeah, and Jeremy Cameron's a pretty agile player. So, we saw Buddy Franklin obviously get through a few more years as an agile forward because he was able to sit down into the goal square for a lot for Sydney. But yeah, I think that's something Geelong seriously need to consider. I think that Melbourne are off with a bit of a rough start. They look like they're losing at least 2, Harms and Jordan. Looks like they're really only linked to Shane McAdams. So I don't know how Melbourne are going to go as well. And they do need to improve because, they do have the room now because Brodie Grundy's out the door. He's gone. But, yeah, they need to fix up. They need to get a tall forward. I don't know why, again, they're not linked to Mabior Chol. He's the biggest, forward out there that they can look at. And none of these teams have been looked at him. The only one who has is Hawthorn. And I think it's a really good acquisition if Hawthorn can get him because the Crows and Brisbane are the other 2 candidates. And I don't think they need him at all. So, yeah, I think a lot of clubs like Fremantle, Melbourne, need to be looking at a player like Mabior Chol. Or looking at next year, because there is a lot of tall forwards next year who are uncontracted. We've got Todd Marshall, Jamara Ugle-Hagan, Norton, and I think Ben King at this stage of those 4. Those 4 are 50-plus goal kickers in the making, if not 60, 70-plus. We've seen Todd Marshall's an excellent kick for goal from set shot, except in the finals. Jamara Ugle-Hagan is, Buddy Franklin in the making almost. Aaron Norton's one of the best contested marks in the comp, and Ben King's just, pretty much all of those combined almost. So, this needs to be looked at by these big clubs in Victoria. And I think also Fremantle seriously need to go hard for Aaron Norton because he is from WA, I believe. So I think that's a big thing that Fremantle need to do. I think even this year, they need to look at getting rid of a couple of players if they have to send to Western Bulldogs and go, we are looking at Aaron Norton seriously. You could lose him for nothing next year, except maybe a compensation pick, which isn't going to do much because we've already heard that the next couple of years of draft is all midfield heavy, so they're not going to be able to do anything with Aaron Norton compensation. So Fremantle need to go hard this time and go, we want Aaron Norton at the club. Convince him to come back to WA because I'm 99% sure he comes from there and get him to the club because even though some people would say he's a defender, this guy is a proven key forward mark and Fremantle have never been able to attract a key forward to their club basically since Pavlich left and ever since before then they really didn't. I really can't remember the history of Fremantle tall forwards because Pavlich was a draft. And, they got Jesse Hogan to the club, but then again, he failed at Fremantle. Obviously went to the Giants and had a pretty good season for them. But, yeah, I think Aaron Norton needs to be looked at by a lot of clubs, and Fremantle need to be the front runner there. They need to throw the bank at him. I think they're also looking at getting rid of Sean Darcy. even though I don't like the idea of Fremantle losing him because I think he's up there as a top 5 ruckman in the comp, if they need to free some space to get a player like Aaron Norton who's potentially going to push you a couple of extra spots up the ladder, they just have to do it. They can't think about things like, but we've put a lot of time into Sean Darcy. You've got Luke Jackson there now. You need to look at this and move forward and go, Luke Jackson's not going to be a forward. Sean Darcy's not going to be a forward. Neither of them want to be sitting in the waffle. So, and neither of them are midfielders. I know Jackson's played a little bit of midfield time and was okay, but that's not the spot for him. He's a ruckman. He's a Nick Nat Nui type almost, and he's proven that he can play a sole ruck when Sean Darcy went down with injury throughout the year. So this is when Fremantle seriously need to have an off-season where they're either doing everything they can to bring Norton in this year or do everything they can to stock up on picks and a potential player to go for him next year, Aaron Norton. I think he's very interesting to look at as well. Sorry, I kind of just focused on Fremantle for a minute, but I think that's an interesting take. I don't know if anyone else believes me. But, St Kilda, I don't know how they're going to go. West Coast, interesting that a lot of players have decided to stay. I think it's very good of them. They've delisted quite a few, and I agree with that, but also think that they should be getting rid of their older players. They've got rid of a few, but there's a lot there. I think Andrew Gaff is very lucky to be sitting in the West Coast list next year, because I don't think he's had a good year at all. And I know there's a lot of West Coast supporters who defend their club to no end, and I get that. I defend Sydney in a lot of thoughts, but also you got to sit there and look at the big picture that Andrew Gaff's not going to be there for your next premiership. He's not. Players like a couple of players that got delisted could have been. I'm not saying that they would have been, but I do think there was a couple of tough ones. Like Foley, for one, I thought he was a pretty decent player. Connor West, I thought he was okay, and Greg Clark, I don't know. But I mean, I feel like keeping one of them on the list before Andrew Gaff would have been a better option, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know West Coast as well as I know other clubs, but I just, from the outside looking in, I think that would have been a little bit more of a better idea. But that's just me. And I don't know if there's any other clubs I missed. Gold Coast, interesting. I don't know what they're going to do with Tim Hardwick. I don't think that they'll get Dustin Martin this year. They don't have enough to do it. And next year, he's another year older. I don't know if it's the right idea. We will see. GWS, I think Elliot Himmelberg's been pretty much the only player linked to them. But I don't know if they need to do a lot. I know it's a big thing saying that for GWS because, like I said, if you're not getting players in, you're not doing much. But I feel like they've got a lot of depth running through the Giants. And, I think they do need to fill some holes, though. There are obviously holes. They got on a big run into the finals. That's the big thing that happened. I think that happened with Sydney last year. They kind of overstepped their bounds almost and got all the way to a grand final. GWS were 1 point away from it. So, I think the Giants do need to look and need to look for a little bit more than just Elliot Himmelberg. But, again, at the end of the day, they only picked up Toby Bedford in the trade period last year, and he was one of the best half-forwards in the comp. So, we'll see how that one plays out. I think that's all the clubs, really, for the trade period going in. So, I think that's my thoughts on every club going into the trade period. We've got a little bit of time left, and I did just want to mention, I know this was so long ago, this is ancient history, basically, but I did want to talk about a little bit with the Callum Mills injury to the shoulder, because it happened basically after the Brownlow podcast that I put out, that half episode that went for about 20 minutes. He was in the off-season. Who cares? Fucking Kane Corn sits there. Oh, he should lose his captaincy and shouldn't be paid until he comes back. Shut up, you dork. You couldn't even last 2 weeks in the fucking fire department, you dog. And now you sit there every single week as a fucking on Footy Classified making clickbait fucking statements to get your bloody news on Channel 9, you dork. Shut up. Now, look, a lot of the time I agree with what Kane Corn says, which is weird from a lot of people. But for him to lose his captaincy over, a Mad Monday incident, which wasn't him snorting coke, it wasn't him having sex with a hooker, he was having a wrestle with one of the boys, and it got a little bit out of hand. And I think he hurt his shoulder cuff or something. Get rooted, Kane, you dork. Absolute noob. And then there's other journalists, I think it was Mitch Cleary who broke the story. Just because you have no friends and every single time people are going out to the pub, you were sitting at home because you were a fucking loser, doesn't mean that you can sit there and go, oh yeah, I think Callum should lose his captaincy because fuck off. Absolute bullshit. And I know that I could have a little bit of bias because I'm a Sydney supporter, but I honestly, if as long as you're not doing something bad, really, as long as you're not breaking the law or doing something heinous, I really don't have an issue in what you're doing in your Mad Monday. You're fucking an AFL player. This is what the thing would have been happening 10, 20 years ago as well, without the thing of phones and that sort of the media hype and all that sort of stuff, because they need their clickbait title, they need their clickbait sort of thing to talk about, because guess what? No one looks at your social media. No one's looking at Cal Toomey's social media on the AFL on Twitter if he's not talking about trade news. You think they care about his dog? No. They don't give a fuck about your cow. And I kind of like him, so I'm not going to have too much of a go at him. But I'm saying, no one gives a fuck about these journalists because... Newsflash, you're a journalist about football. We care about the information you got on football. And trust me, if I had the information, I'm sure we'd have a lot more people, because at least I don't give my own fucking opinion. I mean, Jesus Christ. No, Callum Mills had a wrestle with Jacob Constanti of the Swans, and he broke he hurt his shoulder, and he won't be in for the start of... He may not be in for the start of the season. He should lose his captaincy. Get fucked, you loser. You absolute fucking knob jockey. I swear to God. Oh, that fucked me off to no end seeing all that. Oh, he's fucking... I'm just going to keep on going and whinging about it. Sorry, but it just fucked me off to no end. This... If it wasn't, a captain... I know, he's a captain. Maybe he should be setting an example. But... These guys are, at their job. This is their job. And yes, it's a high-profile job. But, at the end of the day, they're still... in their mid-20s to early 30s at most, What are most other guys doing on their week? If they have 2 weeks off, I had 4 days off from work, and hopefully my boss isn't watching this, but I wasn't doing drugs. I was drinking a couple of 4Xs. By the way, 4X, pretty weak beer. If you're from Queensland, fucking suck down something a little bit stronger. It was like drinking... creaming soda or lemonade. It didn't have much effect on me. I drank 8 or 9. I'm not much of a drinker, and I sat there fine. I didn't drive, so, okay. I drove after the morning after, so I was fine. I didn't have 8 before I went. So, I don't even know why I'm admitting this. Shut up, Dylan. But anyway, I'm just saying, I just think it's crap that, at the end of the day, he was just having a Mad Monday celebration, and the things got a little bit out of hand. And he didn't even know it happened until after, so he was clearly drunk enough. Which is fine, because he's an adult, okay? He'll be coming back, and even if he doesn't, for the first half of the year or whatever, I think Sydney will be okay. And if they're not, well, alright. Fair enough. Good on you, Kane. You fucking can pull the dildo out of your ass now and fucking walk normally. Anyway, thank you guys for watching today's episode of the podcast. Episode 31. Sorry I was a bit rambly throughout the whole thing. I think we pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover in this episode. We will, of course, be doing a trade video towards the end of the week. And if you are new to the channel and you've liked the podcast, make sure to subscribe. And now that the off-season's happened, I think me and my brother are definitely going to try and do podcasts together. And I've got a couple of things coming in the future. So make sure to stick around for that. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, and we'll catch us all next time.